Okay, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Mets Weekly Podcast as we are live at this very moment on YouTube and on X to recap this week's Mets versus Nationals series, as well as all the other news that is going on in Mets land for the last few days. But as we do that, before we got to do what we usually do, which is our usual house cleaning. I want to remind everybody to subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel if you have not already for this very podcast, which is now recorded on Sundays and on Thursdays following every single series of games. For those of you who are watching on playback, which is in the future from us, and you want to join the conversation in the future, which is even more future, make sure to turn on those post notifications to know when we go live. Now, for those of you who are in the live chat right now and are watching live, I want to let you guys know that we love reading your comments, your questions, your concerns. If you feel like you're being ignored, you're not being ignored. They are just being starred throughout the show, and we'll try to pull up as many as we can to keep the flow of the conversation going. Now, also remember to follow Mets Weekly on X and on TikTok, which mainly features Frank's instant reactions after every single Mets game. That's the guy to my right on the screen, and it's titled The Mets Frankly Post Game. And for our audio listeners, make sure to follow us on any of your favorite listening platforms to not miss the audio version of new episodes that drop at 9 a.m. the following day that these are recorded. So without further ado, let's get into episode number 65. And right now, we are riding high in Mets land. We are very, very close to the All-Star break. We're 3 games away, but we just finished up a phenomenal series against the Washington Nationals, completely sweeping them and securing a spot at the moment, of course, because things can change. But the Mets currently stand by a single win percentage point, which I think is .001 over the Padres. They stand alone in the NL wildcard number 3. 2 games over 500 for the first time in a while, I think. Frank, go after this series, very refreshing, very good Mets baseball all around.
Yeah, we finally made it. No more can we get to the wild card? How many games back are we from this team and that team? Like you said, they are here. They are a couple of games above 500. We were in a stretch where we were above 500, under 500, at 500. Now the main thing is, you know what got you here. And it's a matter of keeping going what you're doing and get an even better record because, if San Diego goes on a run or Arizona goes on a run or what have you, you're going to need a better record to maintain that spot. And, like I was pointing out in the chat, they're also, very close to the Cardinals as well for the second wildcard spot. So, you really have got to continue to take advantage of where you are in the schedule right now. You're facing a Washington Nationals team that isn't very good. You have Colorado coming up. You got Miami shortly after. So it's a matter of winning the games you're supposed to. Definitely taking those games and increasing your record, give you a little bit of a buffer for when you face those tougher teams. So you're not totally falling back out of it.
Yeah, I mean, and also we've got a Mets Weekly alum coming in here.
Someone's caught in a time loop.
Clearly, the Mets should trade for Tyler Clippard. I mean, to be honest, there are a few arms that we have had put out on the mound that possibly are worse than him at this current moment.
We could get Addison Reed while we're at it.
We could get Addison Reed as well. How old is Tyler Clippard right now?
He's quite a bit up there because he was old when we had him almost a decade ago. So he's got to be pretty old now.
Yeah, he's got to be in his 40s right now. I'm pretty sure. I probably have to do some research on that. But anyways, this has been a very promising stretch of baseball, of course. To be honest, we all knew that we were going to ride the high from June, and the month of June was, pretty much completely unsustainable. You couldn't repeat what we were doing in June. It was just ridiculous numbers, whether it was individually. And for them to just come into July and still be able to maintain this race with a lot of these other teams, still play competitive baseball. They had a few clunkers or whatever, especially with their bullpen being the way the bullpen has been, and we'll talk about some more arms that they've batted in as of late. We already know that's probably going to be the main target at the trade deadline if they do compete. But when you look at it as a whole, the Mets have really put themselves in a position as to where they are either splitting series, which this is what they did before this series, or they're sweeping. They are winning a majority of games. And it all has really come from a collective team effort, which I think is really something that has kind of lacked from the Mets actually winning games at a consistent point for a long time. We've really seen a lot of top-heavy rosters in the past, and you feel a little bit more comfortable as compared to a team like 2022, where you kind of felt like most of the heavy lifting was coming from one or two pieces on the offense, or one or three guys who were pitching well, especially in the bullpen as well. Like 2022, we had like two relievers who were actually good, and we almost ran them almost into the ground. And you know, when we look at from the full standpoint now, you're seeing a lot of contributors, not only guys who are just exceeding expectations, whether you're talking about guys like Harrison Bader or, pieces like, Severino after the tough year that he has had, or just like Danel Nunez or Danny Young coming out of nowhere, or Reed Garrett, who just went on the injured list, but he pitched well, has pitched well in totality. So when you look at the Mets altogether, we've seen a lot of role players play their roles and be able to maximize this team and look a little bit closer to a 26-man roster that's an actual 26-man roster that is not just holding a couple bodies on here and for some reason they're there. There's still some pieces that we'd like to get rid of. But I would say this team right now, way deeper than it was 2 years ago. And I can take that to the bank, even though they are a little shaky at times. There's good things on the way, let's just say that. And I'm very, very confident in this team as of right now of how they can actually sustain overall as a collective unit, because you need a good team to win, not just good players.
Yeah, I mean, they said it today when Phil Maton came in. He's like the 50th Met they've used this season or something like that. So, I mean, that's basically two 26-man rosters almost. So, we talk so much about like have the best 26, but it's like, okay, well, you're going to need two rosters worth of quality players. And I think to kind of go along with that depth, Jeff McNeil has been starting as the second baseman, but they have a better internal option in Jose Iglesias. And, with the Starling Marte injury, it's given them an avenue for more Iglesias playing time with McNeil moving to the outfield. And Iglesias is coming through. He had a big hit. He had a big walk against Chapman. Like, he's just been a guy that's been phenomenal with runners on base. And, batting average still above 300. OPS plus, WRC plus, well above league average. And the same goes for Luis Torrens, who's still, he had a nice double today as well. He's 7 of 10 throwing out base runners, just insane numbers there. Yeah. And still a well above league average bat as a Met. So even the backups, the guys who don't start, their guys are coming in to fill in. They've been really productive. And it, so the times where it's like, okay, Alvarez needs a day off or Vientos needs a day off, it's not this massive drop off where you're like, oh my gosh, here's a guy that's an automatic out. Like, you don't really get that sense with a lot of this Mets lineup outside of maybe DJ Stewart, where you're like, okay, this guy's automatic out. Like everyone else, you feel like there's a chance that something productive could happen. And, McNeil, obviously been a struggle for him. But like you said, just especially with Bader batting ninth, the 1 through 9, it's just a very different dynamic. I mean, that's how you have Brandon Nimmo over 60 RBIs now. I mean, that's something that we're not expecting to see. And he's catching up with Pete Alonso in the long balls too. So, there's just been a lot of good stories. And I just think the fact that, with baseball, you have like one guy who gets the automatic representation. The fact that there's a case to be made for multiple Mets is also nice. So you have guys who are performing at an elite level, but also just a lot of other guys who are performing above average to go along with it. And like you said, it makes a collective unit.
Yeah, and what I've really liked, obviously, is it's kind of, I don't know if you're talking about like as a certain oxymoron when you say that they have used 50 different players. And I actually think that that's more of a good thing, as to where Stearns has been able to kind of bring in pieces and rotate pieces fairly well and react at the right time. I mean, let's not forget the roster turnover from opening day to now. It's a lot different. Let's just say that. I mean, there's some guys who probably have already overstayed their welcome. Ottavino, Diekman, I'm looking at you. But, when we look at it, he's gotten rid of Narvaez. He's gotten rid of Wendell when he was not performing. I mean, there's been a lot of turnover on this roster where they've kind of been tweaking things in and out to kind of be prepared for these little long stretches, and they've been able to survive that way and still be in the race. It's not perfect, obviously. The situation is not like a guarantee this team is 100% going to the World Series and is going to be a threat in the playoffs. No, they're not there yet, but they've been able to string this along as to where they can put themselves in position over this stretch into striking distance to get to the playoffs. That's where they've been really sitting at. And obviously they've had to play better baseball as they were compared to what they were doing in May, which was horrendous. They were so bad. But right now, I think that the way that Stearns has kind of formed this together is, it really is a team that needs to play for each other, and it can't really just rely on one player alone. And right now they've really done a good job with that. And I really have just always been someone who has, figured to I don't need the full on star power to make my team look good in fantasy baseball. I don't need that. I need a team that collectively as a unit, when one player doesn't play well, there's two other guys that pick them up. And that's what we've really seen from this team. We've seen, as a non-top heavy roster this year, we've seen some over performances from Francisco Lindor, who, even though he always gets under the ridicule has not been as far, because then you have JD Martinez, who will do it in the process of Lindor not doing well. You have Nimmo kind of backing up the situation with Alonso, where Alonso has struggled recently. So you're seeing a lot of players just pick each other up. And right now, when you have this type of stretch, it's going to be a full team effort no matter what. They can't just say, Alonso, you need to do everything for us or we're not going to win. And that's the main reason as to why the Mets have run themselves into trouble so many times year in and year out. Right now, you're seeing the offense perform, still average, I don't know, since June 1st, still average 6 runs a game without Pete Alonso doing much. He's been one of the low contributors right now. That's what a good team does. And I think that was really been lacking for the past 4 or 5 years since, even Pete Alonso was here, or some of these guys who are still here. I mean, it's really impressive what they've been able to do as a collective team. And, when you have a good team like that that's deep enough, cold streaks are not really noticeable. I mean, they all get patched up. And that I think is really, really impressive. Anything else you want to add on that? And then we'll get into the series and everything, all the takeaways.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the credit goes to 3 positions that we've talked about the past few years that have been trouble for the Mets, particularly offensively. Yeah. Third base, DH, and catcher. You have 3 guys now there who are there full-time in Vientos, JD Martinez, and Alvarez. Comparing those guys to Escobar, Daniel Vogelback, and James McCann, you see quite a drastic upgrade just in those 3 players alone. You factor in Nimmo continuing to improve. You add in Lindor, who's obviously been better since his first year as a Met. So you look at also that internal growth, and then you have Harrison Bader doing more than Jake Marisnik or somebody like that. You know what I mean? You've just had so many just different faces here who are now much more productive than the guys we've seen in the past. And this rotation has also finally been kicking into gear. And all of a sudden, you almost have a rotation of everybody with the ERA under 4. So, that's also pretty interesting is that no one is having like an insane year. Like Severino was the closest guy to maybe being considered all-star, but you're just having a rotation of all guys who are putting together a bunch of quality starts. The length has been inconsistent. It's gotten a little better, but still, it's like but they're keeping you in games, So if your starting rotation keeping you in games every day and your offense is averaging you 6 runs a game, that it puts you in a position to win more games than you lose. And when the bullpen's fully rested, as good as Nunez has been, now Diaz is back. Like I've said before, there's a good chance they win. When those guys are not available, things could get bad in a hurry. And I give credit to Mendoza in a game like today where they are up 5-0. And he's trying to avoid Nunez, but he's still trying to win the game. So he goes, all right, Danny Young, I'm going to give you a chance. And he gets a couple outs, but then once the bases are loaded, you could have left him in and maybe you still win the game. But Mendoza's like, I'm not taking any chances. I'm bringing in Nunez. And then you have 7-run leads, so you have Ottavino pitch. You're like, okay, I don't need Diaz. And then once the bases get loaded, Edwin Diaz warms up, doesn't come in, but is able to get out of it. So it's like Mendoza is trying to technically keep his top end guys rested while also still winning the game. So it's like he has, when the guys are kind of rested, like a cutoff of like, I'm going to try to rest these guys. But if it gets to this point, I'm pulling the plug and I'm not messing around. So I do like that he's taken this like not mess around approach while still not completely overworking guys, pitching them 3 days in a row or anything like that. So I feel like he's trying his best, like we said, what he's given. And when guys are just walking the ballpark and loading up the bases, it's tough to, what are you going to do there? You can't necessarily, it's hard to just leave them out there. Like you don't want to risk, you're wasting a really good offensive performance and a really good starting pitching outing as far as the amount of runs that were given up. So I give him credit. It's a battle every day pretty much from Mendoza. It's like you got 2 outs from this guy and 1 out from that guy. He's basically playing 27 outs. He's just like, okay, what combination can I do to get me 27 outs that doesn't totally break everyone in half? Now, Reed Garrett is a guy that ended up suffering the most with his nerve inflammation. And it's kind of
seems like we
double-edged
the worst
sword
with him now. Seems like
that's what they said. They said it definitely could have been worse, but
not good,
he was. It's not good, but he was overworked because of how good he started off this season and being the only reliable guy with so many people out. But then the other thing that happened was the Diaz suspension and the situation where there were no scheduled off days. No matter what, people were going to get overworked. Like that was impossible to avoid, no matter how you do it, because even when your pitcher goes 6 innings and you say, okay, well now who could I bring in the 7th inning? It's like I could bring in Young, but he pitched yesterday. I could pitch Diekman, but he pitched yesterday. I could do Ottavino, but he did 2 days ago. You know what I mean? So it's like there's always like this back and forth. Phil Maton, he did an excellent inning, but still, it's like no matter what, unless your pitchers are going like 8 innings, 7 innings quite frequently, people are going to end up working back-to-back days. I mean, that's just the situation. I wish that rosters would allow the Mets could send down Gamble for another pitcher because we have not seen this guy at all, So I feel like the Mets could really benefit from having another pitcher. Then they wouldn't overwork their guys. The fact that there's a limit of how many pitchers you could carry, I feel like that's dumb. I feel like that should be up to the team. If the team wants more position players, they can. If they want more pitchers, they can. I mean, they've tried all these different things to where you don't have a bunch of pitching changes, try to pace a game or whatever. But I think at some point you have to consider player safety in a certain aspect where, you don't want these guys getting hurt as well. So, I mean, that's just my opinion. I feel like the Mets would definitely benefit more from having another pitcher than a Ben Gamel or even a DJ Stewart on this roster. Like, I mean, at this point, again, if it was up to me, like, no joke, I would send down Gamel and send down Stewart. Let Taylor play with it and give me 2 more pitchers because it's just keeping the arms rested and also keeping them fresh. Because like with Reed Garrett, his numbers are just so drastic, like days of rest. I was looking at it. It was 0 days of rest, 4.76 ERA. 1 day rest, 6.75. Then 2 days and greater, all was like in the 150s. Just a totally different pitcher when he actually gets rested. But with the way it shakes out, it's like who else are you going to go to, So they just find themselves in a tough spot far too frequently, and it leads to injuries or guys not being as effective. So it just puts them in a tough spot.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about this on Twitter yesterday. Basically, I think that was the same split that you just brought up. I think the same post that you were just referring to. I basically said, it's like, can we sit this guy to the rest of the All-Star break because they're going to kill him? And then an hour later, he goes into the IL, and I'm like, yep, well, there you go. There's your example. Like, I feel like for the last like week or two, I have really been with Reed Garrett. It's like, okay, we are really running this guy into the ground right now, and I really don't blame him for like even if he break down or not, because like he's coming towards like on pace for like, what is it, over 70 innings as a reliever. That's a lot. That is a lot for a major league reliever these days. So I mean, I don't know, because usually the typical is like 60 to 65 innings if you're a good reliever. He's not even the best reliever on the team. He's one of the best as of right now. He's been one of the most reliable for us, but I mean, you can't push it as much as they have, and I don't blame them, because obviously they have some holes in that bullpen of guys that they can't really trust. And that's really what I do give credit to Mendoza, of course, and it's not really just him, because there has been points where he's left guys in a little bit too long, like at the beginning of the season, and then there's the times where he's pushed guys where he's took them out too early, or maybe like he just didn't get that again, timing,
like,
but. That again,
Christian
more,
Scott
it looks
last
at more
week
of,
was the one where I was like, okay, you pushed him too much, But
that
other
more
than
of
that,
it, more of that looks like,
good.
Yeah, more of that. I think of it's more of just the growing pain as the manager and kind of just learning the game as you go along. But also, you also add into that other element of what he's had to deal with, and that is being not just a major league manager, but a Mets manager. When all this crazy shit just happens during a 162 game season, your closer gets suspended. Your best lefty reliever goes down with Tommy John surgery. Your starters on back-to-back days can't go past 3 innings. I mean, those are the types of things that happen on the Mets. It's different to be a Mets manager than a major league manager. We know this. The Mets are just a different brand of baseball. We know that no matter what. You can change the owner. You can change the team. What is it? You can change the jersey number. It doesn't matter.
Change the helmet. Yeah,
change the helmet. Change the uniform. Doesn't matter. But obviously... anything else you want to add, obviously? But
I just have Reed Garrett pulled up real quick. So
yeah.
Last year in 2023, between Baltimore and the Mets, his major league total of innings pitched was 19.2, and he's at 42. So he's already at double the workload of what he did in the major leagues last year. And again, these are major league innings. These are high leverage, high stress innings. These are up down. Increased velocity. The outings are 20 plus pitches, so it's different. And they were using him much different in the beginning of the season. He had a lot more like multi-inning outings, they've kind of changed the role for him. But that's the other thing too. It's just like the arm just trying to get used to the workload as well. Like that's the thing I talked about with Scott is that, the major league expectations of a 162 for some of these guys. And it's just a totally different environment.
Yeah, the biggest workload I'm pretty sure he had was like back in 2015 when he was with the Texas organization, and he had like 139 innings back in 2015 for their low A affiliates. So it's like it's been a while since he's actually had that type of workload. So I mean, I don't know. I said that this would happen because you're going to kill him, but whatever. It doesn't seem like he's going to be out for long. It seems like they dodged a bullet there. We'll obviously get into that with the injury report later on, but let's obviously get into this series, these last 3 games, which have obviously been very impressive. The Mets, a lot of timely hitting, a lot of starting pitching, shining and pushing through lots and lots of length. And putting the bullpen in a better position to like do something, but obviously there's a little bit of nervousness that will always go on with the Mets bullpen. It seems like every single day. The first game of the series, 7 scoreless innings from Jose Quintana, who we'll get into later, was topping 94 as well, and that was actually consistently towards the middle of that outing, you had a home run from Lindor, a home run from Nimmo. You had even at the end, McNeil adding it on with a run batted in, a hit from Martinez, and you had a triple from Tyrone Taylor, 3-hit game for Bader, 3-hit game for Lindor as well. But the Mets obviously had to make it interesting with how the bullpen has been and how they like to nibble around the strike zone. And they allowed 5 earned runs while they were up 6-0. And Diaz had to come in and finish it and get the last batter. The Mets won the game 7-5. Second game, Luis Severino. Seemed like a really good start for him. There were some real miscues from him. I will say that obviously have been discussed, and we'll probably touch on that a little bit. But overall, he did give us quality: 6 1/3, 2 earned runs, 3 walks, 4 strikeouts. The velocity pretty much the same. Another home run for Nimmo, which I believe carried with devil magic. I don't know how that happened, but another run batted in for Vientos on a 2-hit game. 3 for 4. Oh my God. Jose Iglesias, two RBIs later on in the game. 2-hit game for Alonso. Another run batted in by Tyrone Taylor. You had a hit from Martinez, and then it was pretty stress-free for the bullpen, which is actually, something new for us. Let's just say that. The bullpen with 3 2/3 scoreless, and then you had Jose Butto working up-down and get his first major league save. Now, in the series finale, David Peterson gave us 6 scoreless innings, lots of traffic on the base paths, but he was able to get out of it every single time, completely unscathed. Another 3 RBI performance from Brandon Nimmo, just basically the hottest hitter in all of baseball. Nobody can stop him at all. A 3-hit game for Martinez. He drove in another run. You had a run batted in by Alonso. Vientos drove in a run. Bader drove in a run. The Mets put up 7 runs and finally got to Mackenzie Gore later on in the game and won 7-0, which is the first ever shutout of the 2024 season. I understand that sounds sad, but it kind of makes sense with how the Mets have gotten themselves in these close types of games. And like we've said, with that first shutout of the season, it was really, really, really encouraging because that was the one that put us over the top into the National League wild card, number 3, the final one, and now we don't have to do anything for the rest of the season. We're finally in the spot, and now we can just crap out. It's fine. We're finally in there. We can take the screenshot, stop the count, as they like to say. 2 games over 500. Main takeaways from this series. Frank, what did you like? What did you dislike? I obviously do want to cue you in first with the Severino situation yesterday of him not covering behind home plate, which, I mean, I that's a problem. That is going to be a problem, especially with a team that allows a lot of batted balls in play, a lot of defensive miscues. You can't have the pitcher doing that as well. Putting the team in a shittier position. Obviously, they still won the game. He still pitched fine. But those were things that it seems like are going to be cleared up. But hopefully, this series, they did what they had to do. Swept the Nationals.
Yeah, I think with Severino, there's been a change in his approach. I feel like earlier in the season, he was more strikeout heavy as far as the way he was pitching, pitch selection, things like that. Whereas now he's been more pitch to contact. And the results as far as the runs being given up are higher, but he's working deeper into games because Severino is one of those guys who would find himself like a 5-inning start, 6-inning start, no runs, 8 strikeouts or whatever. But if he's not going deep into games, it ended up hurting the Mets in the long run for the rest of the week. So now that he is working a little further into games, but giving them more hits, more runs on the flip side, if you're going to be a pitch to contact pitcher, you've got to be ready to react when that contact does happen. So backing up home plate is like a must, especially if their ball is going to constantly be put in play. So it was very strange to me that was happening. And when they asked Mendoza after the game, he said it'll be fixed. So I'm just kind of curious to see what happens afterwards. Like if it happens again, then it's definitely time to okay, what's really going on? We got a serious conversation. There's no such thing as letting it slide, but I'm just gonna kind of see what happens going forward. I did find it weird. Particularly the second one, especially okay, I missed out, another run scored, blah, blah, blah. And then for the very next hitter, or not very next hitter, but for it to happen again in the same inning was oh, you did it again. That's really not ideal. So I did find that concerning for sure. but I'm gonna kind of keep confidence in Mendoza and the veteran leadership on this team to clean that stuff up, correct it, and not have it happen again. So we'll see kind of how that whole situation goes. But for the Mets, getting back to their offensive ways, as far as like what gave them so much success in June, scoring 6 to 7 runs a game, doing it at home, which we know is not always a given. It is a tough ballpark unless the wind's going out to left field for Brandon Nimmo. Nimmo's got a little bit of that all-star win, just like the power of Jesus win. Like, I will get you to the all-star game. We're just going to keep pushing that ball, and you're just going to keep going off because it's becoming undeniable. Like, he was snubbed to begin with. He should have been on the team. But with how he's playing afterwards, like, it is undeniable. He's got to get in. He just has to. Like, he's just been on another level, especially recently, that the numbers are they're too good to ignore. You know what I mean? And obviously the impact to the team, making them a winning team, they're in playoff position and getting the big hits, like we said. So he's just done so much. And then on the first game, it was kind of that same situation that almost happened today where, with the lead that they have, they go to Ottavino. He could only get one batter out. He gives up a couple runs. Game's getting a little close. Okay, I have to go to Nunez. But it's like, all right, we got you some insurance runs. Let me go to Reed Garrett. Garrett makes it close. Now let me go get Diaz. So, it's just, again, he's trying his best to rest Nunez and Diaz because those are the two best arms that you want to have in the close games. But when these other arms are making it close games, if you still want to win, he needs to use them. So, again, these other guys are just making it too close for comfort. So that definitely is something that we'll see because they got Maton. Now we'll see how the All-Star break affects these guys. See if the effectiveness gets a little better. We don't know when or if Bryce or Fujinami might get added into the mix. And as they stay where they're at, if they are holding a wild card spot, they got to add at least another arm or two as far as bullpen arms. They just need more in general. Even if they start out in the minors and then get here, like they just need more arms. Because like we said, they've already used 50 players and they've had so many injuries to relief pitching. Obviously, like I said, Brooks Raley, Drew Smith, Sean Ray Foley's out right now. So what happens when he's back? So there still is just kind of being planned for any outcome, I think is important. They just really got to add some more arms. So getting the sweep is nice. And as far as the shutout thing, I feel like they could have got it earlier in the season if they really, really wanted to. Like, I'm sure there was a game where it was scoreless and they could have just went Nunez Diaz game over. But again, they tried to rest them. These guys give some runs back and then it happens. But the other thing with Nunez, real quick, just another shout out for him. He's come in with 10 runners inherited this season, stranded all of them. So they put him into what I always call, like when he was in Cleveland, the Andrew Miller role, the fireman role. Like, okay, here is the biggest situation in the game, our toughest spot. Nunez, go put out the fire. And like today, he threw 4 pitches, but those were 4 really important pitches. And it's because he does such a good job of not walking batters. He's the only guy in this bullpen that does not walk the ballpark. I mean, Diaz doesn't have as much a walk problem as the other guys, but he has the wild pitch thing every now and then. So Nunez is like that one guy that you can trust runners on base because he's not going to add more guys on. He's actually going to attack hitters, a very high strikeout guy. So, I mean, I just can't give him enough credit. He's just been fantastic. And I hope it stays this way. I love that with the insurance runs the Mets were able to get, they didn't have him go out there for the 9th inning. Like, you could have, no doubt, I'm sure, but just saving at least a couple of pitches from him, I think could kind of go a long way for if you are in a tight game. It's like, all right, at least, he'll be available.
Yeah, obviously they need to go through the obstacles of some of these arms that are obviously not reliable. You can't rely on it. And even if you talk about, Jake Diekman yesterday, who had a clean outing, I still don't trust that guy at all. It doesn't change whatsoever by seeing him face 2 batters and strike them both out, especially against a Nationals team that strikes out more than almost anybody in the league. I'm pretty sure whoever strikes out a little bit more than them is Oakland, Colorado, and I forget what other team. There's somebody else ahead of them or something. At some point, I don't know if that has changed, but if we're talking about relievers such as Fujinami, he did give up a home run today, but other than that, he was pretty clean. 2 strikeouts. in Syracuse, following up a Tyler McGill start where he gave up 4 runs in 5 innings. So this is probably the next move as to where it is with Tyler McGill, where again it's a fluctuated it's a fluctuated level at AAA. In AAA, you give up 4 runs. It's like 2 runs. In AA, maybe it's like 3 runs in the major leagues if you're talking about the environment. But 4-run ball in 5 innings, we've seen McGill do that plenty of times in the major leagues. So let's just say that. I mean, at one point they do got to move him to the bullpen, but I guess as of right now, they still want him stretched out as a starter. Matt Gage also pitched, which we'll get into in a second. He gave you a clean 2/3 of an inning, got 2 outs, gave up a hit, nothing crazy. So that's basically from AAA. Of course, grain of salt, crazy level there. But I think when the Mets just fill in some of these pieces and they actually find the combination that they like, again, I'm not asking for the world of all elite relievers and go out to the market of, the best out there, whether it is David Robertson that you want to go get or Kirby Yates or somebody who's red hot right now, because you just never know what a reliever is going to do. You don't know how they're going to perform. You can kind of tell what can do well for them and what can do bad for them. And what their issues are, what their strengths and weaknesses are, but you just never know because it's just a very finicky position. So when people are talking about, let's bring in Kirby Yates, let's bring in David Robertson, let's go trade for this guy, let's go trade for that guy, I mean, I have no real grasp on it whatsoever, because I think that we've already learned that no matter what reliever comes over here or whatever reliever switches teams in the middle of the season, it really does bring down there is a down expectation that comes instantly, whether it is the top guys or whether it is some of the low-lane guys, like whether you're talking about a Michael Givens who came over here and really struggled when he was traded over here, or whether you're talking about Craig Kimbrell when he was traded over to, what was it, the White Sox or whatever. He was horrendous. David Robertson is another one. Last year, basically one of the reasons as to why the Marlins were hanging on for dear life in the playoff race last year, and he was not good whatsoever since he got traded to the Marlins. Obviously, he bounced back, but the Mets used him a lot, and that really came to fruition, obviously. But I think that when you talk about, just bringing in any of these relievers, the best thing that you can spend on them personally is cash. I think that that's the best way to do it. I understand they've acquired some guys for cash considerations that have not been good. I get it. But that's really all that's really available, and it's not really worth it to really give up any notable assets for any reliever whatsoever. I think that when you talk about it, arms will always be very inconsistent, especially with walk rates going through the roof these days with this game. The Mets have continued to have that problem. It seems like kind of a major league deficiency. The Mets need to just acquire talent for cash, and they have to trust that Mets fans have to trust that David Stearns knows what he's doing. And hopefully that gets proven with Maton, somebody like Matt Gage as well, who they also acquired. They need to just kind of put in and fill in these pieces. And I get that it's not the big names, but I think when the Mets just kind of bring in some of these pieces who may have had success in a while, like Ty Adcock, I don't think he's really ever had any success whatsoever in the major league level. He has had very little. So maybe there is some mix of proven and some upside that they can go off of, but I'm not shelling out assets for a reliever. It's just not going to happen. There is no reason I don't care if Edwin Diaz has a horrendous stretch. I'm not doing it. There's no reason to do it as to where you need to give up anybody in your top 10, your top 15 for a reliever. That's just stupid. You can find relievers anywhere. You know how, like I said, you can find a second baseman at Walmart? You can find a reliever, I don't know, maybe a little bit like at a Brookstone or something like that, at a Macy's or something, like maybe a little bit higher of a level as compared to Walmart, because we all know Walmart is the highest of class of all stores out there. But I think the best way they need to look at it right now is the waiver wire. Do they like some guys in AAA as of right now? And they're going to have to piece it together, because I do think that there is internal options right now in the organization that you can form a good bullpen with. But they're going to have to retool that and try and figure that out. And hopefully they do that with these two pieces that we did get for cash considerations, which is the approach that I just preached as to where the Mets should do it. Let's talk about Matt Gage and Phil Maton. Now, the Mets acquired Matt Gage, I think it was a few days ago. It was before our stream last time. I do want to do a little bit more of a rundown on him. Phil Maton, we saw pitch today in a low leverage situation. It was clean, nothing. I mean, that was it. And I think that when you look at these two guys, they're not very reliever friendly, reliever populated, as to where they are the ideal arms that you want in your bullpen. Jeez, if I could speak properly, this would be a lot better. Matt Gage, when you look at him, there's nothing that really completely meets the eye. Obviously, everyone goes to the full-on velocity, but Matt Gage has always been someone who has been a very vertically enhanced pitcher, a very kind of a cutter, sort of works through the zone, and is able to get a lot of whiffs with a lot more late explosiveness, stuff like that. Like, this is kind of one of those like left anchor types of, I wouldn't say it's Justin Wilson to say the least, but it's coming from kind of one of those high slots, one of those unorthodox slots, as to where any type of window that he's able to hit, he's going to get those types of whiffs. And it all really relies on, just again, making pitches, which is a lot of the cases for a lot of these relievers, which we have not really been able to see so far this season. Now, Phil Maton is a completely different pitcher. Phil Maton, nothing to do with velocity whatsoever. He has it based on spin rate and a lot, and I mean a lot, of arm side movement, whether you're looking at it horizontally and vertically. Incredible stuff. He's had command issues so far this season. Hasn't been able to get the curveball over, but he was able to do that today. And of course, it's more of just movement with him. He's able to if he's able to contact manage, he's good. And he's able to kind of bail himself out as to where he's not really as explosive, but he's able to torture people throughout the zone with kind of a kitchen sink, whether you talk about it from his cutter or his curve or his sweeper or that slider. He's able to tunnel pitches fairly well and possibly get a lot more chases as compared to what he's been getting this year. But he was able to do that when he was with Houston, and do that a little bit with the Tampa Bay Rays, but at a lower rate. He has had a down season, of course. The Mets were connected to him in the offseason, so to get him for cash is pretty impressive. So Matt Gage, Phil Maton. Gage came from the Dodgers. The Dodgers said that they were very impressed with him, but they just didn't have any room for him. So that is pretty, a good, that's a good reference to go off of, a team as the Dodgers, who has been able to develop pitching the way that they have, and kind of like find the best as to where some of these guys just come out of nowhere, or some guys who are just complete bums and they just come and they pitch very well for the Dodgers. Anthony Bonda, who is going to be starting for the Dodgers tonight. I can't believe he's actually starting. I remember him as a Met not even being able to get through half of an inning. But I mean, they get the best out of some of these pitchers, so maybe it does translate over here. Maybe it doesn't. I know that there has been a lot of upside. I believe Matt Gage was a top prospect years and years ago. But those are the types of arms that you're going to get on this market, and hopefully they are some plug-in pieces you can bring into this bullpen before you go completely all out and say that, oh well, we got to get David Robertson. We got to get Kirby Yates. We got to go trade our entire farm system for Mason Miller. Before you do that, let's just say the Mets are taking the right approach here as to where they have cash considerations. They got tons of cash, and they're trading it. They got a lot of cash for a lot of the Yohan Ramirez's of the world and the Michael Tonkins and that. So they're using that cash for some arms. So they brought in these two guys this week. Obviously, they're looking to make changes. They're making them slowly, of course, because as relievers go by, it's a wild ride. You never know how the consistency goes out. So these two arms, Frank, what do you like? What do you dislike? Do you think these guys are good contributors? Do you think that they're just going to be another guy that we just throw across the wayside in a week? What do you think? Do you think this is a little bit more promising, or is this in the level of Jeff Hartlieb and what is it? Who's that other guy that we picked up just randomly? I mean, Anthony Bonda we did, and then what was it? I forget. There was tons of guys we had on that 2021 team that just came in out of nowhere and pitched for absolutely no reason. So what do you think about these two arms? Are these reliable? Do you think this is something that can fill in the bullpen?
Yeah, I mean, they both came from Houston. They were both on Houston last year. So, I mean, that's a very good pitching organization to come from. If you've worked with them, you've been with one of the best organizations as far as like tailoring your stuff to fit. Whether they do it via cheating, I don't know. But if they made you a better player, we'll take it. They do. Listen, that's what it's all about, because this is what it comes down to. Jeremy Hefner ain't going to fix these guys. So if you get a Phil Maton from Tampa who fixes you, or Matt Gage being with the Astros, with the Dodgers, all these good organizations, they're the ones that do the hard work to actually get the pitcher be good. And now it's just up to the Mets to not mess it up. They don't have to do the fixing. It's already been done for them. So that's kind of been the key to me, because you look all around the league, you turn on a game on LB Network, you'd be like, oh, that guy used to pitch for the Mets. Wait, he's good now? I remember that guy stunk. Like, again, you just see so many guys who are better without the Mets. So getting guys who already have been with organizations in like their first run, and it's like, okay, now try to get something out of them. That's what makes it a lot easier for the Mets. So with Phil Maton, there's not much work to do. I mean, he's a guy who's had success in this league for a few years now. We know what a reliever, sometimes it's good year, bad year, things like that. But no, he's a guy that I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I know that guy. Like, I've definitely seen that name. And then sure enough, like, this is a guy that I said in my video, but like, he pitched in the World Series. He pitched in the Championship Series last year. Like, this is a guy that Houston is going to in big spots, and he came through in big spots. So he's someone that I have a lot more confidence in than a lot of those other guys you've mentioned, or even the guys we've seen recently, the Adcock and Matt Festa and Tyler J, and just all these guys that were like, come on, what are we doing here, folks? So with someone like that, I do have more confidence in. When it comes to someone like Matt Gage, I feel like the fact that he's left-handed is the thing that's intriguing to me. I just feel like, whether people believe in righty-lefty matchups, whatever, other teams do. So if you could use that as a piece to where it's like you could shorten the bench or just change an approach, be like, let's say a Jesse Winker, for example. It's like if you can get him out of a game or have them not use him or something, like I feel like using it as like a counter, to kind of change up some things that teams are doing, I feel like that's something that could help you out. There just are those times where, like we saw with Pittsburgh or even sometimes with the Nationals, like where teams stack up the lefties, like having a lefty you can go to that isn't Jake Diekman is something that could be pretty appealing for you. Now, could Danny Young do that? I don't know. I mean, there was a time I thought he could until he started pitching and or warming up every day, and then his effectiveness kind of wore off. And now already he's back and has already pitched on back-to-back days. So, it's kind of tough. I feel like there is something to be said to the effect of if you are that good, they'll find a way to get you on the roster. So the fact that the Dodgers couldn't hold on to him, I'm like, did you love him that much if you DFA'd him? So like there is something to that effect of like if you are really good at team, we'll try to keep you. So we'll see. I feel like the fact that there is stuff though that they can spin a ball and it has break and stuff like that, that's good because a lot of these other guys, and these are two soft tossers, so to speak, more so obviously with Maton, but the Mets have soft tossers with no stuff. So the fact that these guys actually have some stuff, I think is also appealing. And again, just with who they've had, these are upgrades. So I think that's just the main thing is that, and also they're fresh arms. That's another big part is that a lot of the arms the Mets have, whether they're better, whether they're not better, if they're all super tired, they're just not going to be good. So I think just also getting more arms into the organization to have for when Reed Garrett has nerve inflammation or other things happen, like I said, just kind of being prepared for all these different scenarios. And that's why, like, people are talking about trading Quintana. And listen, I said it on the last episode, but I think Quintana's a fraud. I feel like we're going to talk about him a little bit, but I feel like he's a big beneficiary of Francisco Alvarez. So I see the appeal of trading Quintana and getting value back for him. But I just think the Met, like, pitching is so fragile that you could just lose an arm, and I just don't want to be playing shorthanded. I feel like I want to keep all my pitchers. If I'm actually going to try to be a playoff run, you need all your arms. I don't like trading off arms right now. So that's just kind of how I feel. So I think as long as they're adding guys, I'm all for it. And you're going to have to keep doing it. And I think another really encouraging thing is seeing Budo's performance, especially now is like more of a true reliever role in this past series with Washington. So that's not just the normal traditional long relief role, up by a lot, down by a lot. Like there was no, okay, here you are, a save opportunity. And Budo came through in that situation as well. So they just got to keep going out there until you find a few guys that stick, and then you make your bullpen. They got the hardest part done. They have a closer and they have a setup man. So you got the eighth and ninth inning done. Now you just got to figure out the rest of it. And that's kind of where these guys fall into place. Like that's where Maton is useful, sixth inning, seventh inning, and then again with Matt Gage we'll see. But I feel like that's just kind of what they're trying to do is they got the tough part down, but it's just a matter of getting to those guys and having other guys available when those guys are rested. That then they'll actually have a bullpen they could use.
Yeah, obviously it's very weird in the sense that the Mets really have options that are here internally, but you just don't really know when they're going to actually pull the trigger as to some of these guys who have not made their debuts yet. Obviously, we saw Eric Orzi, who was optioned down to AAA. Syracuse put into a kind of a shitty situation, obviously. Who I mean, I think that he could be a solid pitcher, but it's not like it's really anything crazy as to where I need to keep this guy on the roster because there's so much upside whatsoever. But there's other pieces like Jazz is saying here in the chat. Bryce Montes de Oca, who we've talked about, who we hope can be a piece to this Mets bullpen and a big factor at that. Wilkin Ramos, Paul Gervais, like I think that these guys have both had their struggles in and out of the minor league system. And again, like most of this has come from the AAA level. So it's not even really, it's really just not like, it's all really fluctuated as to how things do get applied. But you also do have that concern as to where Jeremy Hefner has really fumbled a lot of situations, let's just say that, and there hasn't really been good enough execution. And, M. Easy saying things like, you can find a reliever anywhere. I mean, was I wrong? Am I wrong? Like, I mean, we see a bunch of trash come off the Mets roster. They go over somewhere else and they succeed. I mean, it's all about catching lightning in a bottle with this, because if you're projecting this well, if they project well, if they're able to, execute fairly well, and you believe in one of these arms, you go get them and they perform, great. It's a bang for your buck. Of course, awesome. But if they don't, and you move on, because these relievers, they don't really show any fair consistency as to where they are just a premier reliever in this game. Like, there is a possibility that Danel Nunez next year, if he comes back, there's a possibility he's awful. You just never know. That's just kind of how the consistency goes, and that's the main reason as to why relievers are relievers. That's the life of the reliever, because there's a lot of transitions in and out of the minor leagues, the major leagues. That's just how it is. So there's no way that you can just say, oh, I got to lock down an 8-man bullpen. You can't do that. It's not possible, you know? I think that if you talk about just the Mets as a whole, obviously there are some deficiencies that go on with the Mets organization. Yes. But there are pieces that you could plug in and find anywhere that you can turn into treasure. There is not really a script to go by with relievers. There really isn't. There's not not everybody is Aroldis Chapman, who's been in this game for a long time, and he's had his moments too. Not everybody is David Robertson. Like, not everybody, like, that's the top 1% we're talking about here. The rest of the league, it's a crapshoot, complete crapshoot.
Yeah, we joked about Addison Reed in the beginning of the show, but when the Mets acquired him, he was not like this all-star, amazing pitcher everybody knew. Like, they didn't give up much, and he turned out to be phenomenal multiple years, actually. So it's like you said, with relievers, it's hard to predict. It's not always the guys that have the great numbers. I mean, just sometimes a couple of tweaks, just different situations, they figure it out, and they turn out to be good players.
Hector Neris from the Cubs, he's had a long career.
Yeah.
He's had his moments as well. Like, that's the thing. It's like you have those blow-ups even from the best of the best that have been like that. Let's not forget, I mean, even the best reliever of all time that everybody says, Mariano Rivera, he's had a few blow-ups as well. A lot of them against the Mets, actually.
David Wright got a walk-off hit against him. Did you know that?
Yeah. Didn't Ronnie Polino tie a game against him or something? Like, we've had some weird ways with Mariano Rivera. Very odd.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, that goes without saying, Ramon. I mean, most pitchers are better than Diekman. And like we said, we think Diekman's just here because he's left-handed. Unfortunately, Neris is not. But, I mean, he's a name.
And, like, Trevor, I don't know who Trevor Goat is. He's asking how Trevor Gott did last year. Well, maybe, I don't know, hire a GM that doesn't have their head up their ass constantly. Maybe that'll prevent that. But relievers are relievers. You just never know. Like, it's literally just, okay, I'm rolling the craps dice, and like, do I get the snake eyes or not? Like, that's literally how it is with relievers. Whether they have good stuff or good upside or whatever, they still need to execute it. And you're going to get that from David Stearns, whether he succeeds or not. He has a great eye for pitching, but the thing is that he's still going to have guys who do fail. There's going to be fails.
Yeah.
It happens. Because that's how relievers are. It's always how they've been. I think, Matt Franco getting a hit off him. All right, we're going back to this nostalgia point of it. But what I'm saying is, like, it's really hard to predict. You have data as to where you can try and predict this stuff, and you can try and project things better, but you never know. I mean, this guy can be so amazing and have amazing stuff, but he still can't execute command properly, or he can't throw a strike or whatever. Like guys like Heath Hembry, who we brought in here. Incredible stuff. Throws hard, wicked curve, tons of meatballs. Yeah. Loads of meatballs. The pitch shape is there. Pitch shape is great. Velocity's there. But he's not making good pitches. They all got to put it all together. And they have a little limited sample to do that. Because remember, they come in for one inning, right? So one mistake, they're gone. They're done. Life of a reliever. That's how it is. Life on the range. Okay. Now, obviously, I want to go into Jose Quintana because we did hint about it a little bit. Frank kind of was a little harsh there. But when we talk about Jose Quintana, I'd say, I don't know, was it like 3 or 4 weeks ago? Before like the middle of June or something like that, we were ready to toss this dude off a bridge. Like, we were ready to take this dude out of the rotation. Couldn't get through the 5th inning, walking batters with stuff that really is just not high profile whatsoever. He had nothing go for him whatsoever. And Recently, the last 7 starts, let's just say that, which is the last 2 months of baseball, he's been really good. He's been able to get you a lot more quality. He's been striking out a lot more batters. And he's actually looked like a competent back-end starter for the Mets recently. Now, I obviously asked this in the chat about Jose Quintana, asking, would you trade Jose Quintana at the trade deadline on August 1st? Now, for those of you in here who have not answered that poll, go ahead and do it, and we'll revert back to it in about 5 minutes. But I do want to obviously pull up what has been going on with Jose Quintana, because the comparison is pretty drastic. When you look at the first 11 starts that he has had, whether you're looking at the ERA over 5, a 4.8, a 4.86 fielding independent pitching, whether you see the low strikeout rate, lots of home runs, WPA, which is win probability added, basically putting the team in a position to win, basically, by his actions. A lot of this we have seen, most of this has to do with the return of Francisco Alvarez. And I think that is really an impact that we can talk about for most of the pitchers because of how great Francisco Alvarez is behind the plate and how good of a defensive catcher he has been since he came up here at such a young age. And of course, Omar Narvaez being a complete disaster, Tomas Nido being Tomas Nido, who's a serviceable backup catcher on any team. And then Luis Torrens, of course, who he's pretty much been the worst with, which is weird. But Jose Quintana has definitely been caught by every single catcher that we've had this year. And it's been the best with Francisco Alvarez, his fellow countryman from Venezuela. I don't know if that's the connection or something. But in those 8 games that Alvarez has been catching him, a 1.76 earned run average. He's striking out over 20% of batters. Opponents are batting 199 against him. There's not much power involved. There's less home runs. And opponents, an OPS plus of 87, which is pretty much a complete difference maker as compared to somebody like Narvaez or Nido or Torrens. Now, Torrens has been more good for Peterson. I don't know. Like, he's like the only one because, Peterson's odd and dorky. So, but with Francisco Alvarez, the overall impact of him, we've talked about this so many goddamn times. And Frank, I want you to add to your statement of, as do you see Jose Quintana as a fraud? Do you think that this is just fraudulent? This isn't real? You're imagining it?
I just think the numbers are so drastic because the other thing, like, to go along like with the ERA and like all the percentages, I just look more like the innings and actual runs allowed. So it's 2 starts with Torrens, so it's like 7 innings, 6 earned run totals compared to Alvarez 46 innings, 9 earned runs. So it's like 40 innings, only 3 more runs. Like, that's crazy. Or even for Narvaez, where it was 27 innings, that's 14 runs. Nido, 15 innings of 13 runs. And again, it's like Alvarez giving up less runs in like double the innings. Like, that's just so, like, it's just such a big factor that, and to go along with Manaea, his numbers look much different with Alvarez, and the team in general, their record with and without Alvarez, that what else could it be? I mean, the only true way to find out is saying, like, okay, is Quintana for real now? Have Torrens make a start with him. If it goes bad again, then you're like, oh, well, guess it was Alvarez after all. So there's only one way to find out, and that's to not have Alvarez catch him. But I wouldn't do that
seems
if
like
you're
a
trying.
punt game at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, but I wouldn't do that because you're trying to win. So you're just going to leave it the way it is. But the way I see it is that if, sake of argument, let's say you do a trade. Let's play a scenario. You trade Quintana. Okay, fine. And whatever you get, whether it's young pieces, maybe it is a reliever, I don't know what you get. An outfielder, something, a second baseman, whatever it is that you get. Okay, fine, you trade him. Now you're under the assumption that Senga's back, he replaces him, and you're going with 5-man rotation. All right, fine. But if Senga does have a setback, if he does get hurt again, Luis Severino has a big injury history. And, at this point, David Peterson, he's got hurt plenty of times. Am I trusting, and if any of those guys go down, am I trusting Tyler McGill again? And if Budo is finally doing something for me in the bullpen, do I want to take away from a bullpen that's already struggling? I just think it's too risky. That's ultimately what it comes down to. Like, if, like I say this example, if it's MLB The Show and injuries are turned off, 100%, I'd trade him. I'd get something back for him because of his contract and how inconsistent he could be. But I think with the reality of pitching and just you can't risk it and be another arm down, because then you're one injury from then who is going to make a start. Like if you get trade Quintana and 2 injuries happen, then what's your answer? That's kind of where it gets a little dicey, and I just don't want to have that be a possible scenario. I don't even want to risk that. So you know what? If it means Alvarez has to catch him and you finally get a good pitcher out of him, then so be it. That's ultimately what it comes down to, for me at least.
Yeah, I kind of look at it from the other end, and we'll look at the poll, obviously, in the chat. If you would trade Jose Quintana at the trade deadline, which is August 1st, 46% of you are saying no. 28% of you are saying yes, and 26% of you are saying that you're not sure yet. Here's the problem here, okay? I see this as the same situation, and this is 2 different pitchers, completely different. Obviously, they throw with different hands. I see this as the same situation we had 2 years ago with Taijuan Walker. I wanted to see the Mets trade Taijuan Walker at the trade deadline at that current moment. I understand that he was pitching well, and the Mets were buyers, and they were on pace for an 101-win team. So amazing. Billy Epler, the savior. I wanted to see them somewhat manage an asset to make the rotation a little bit younger going into the next year, which obviously was one of the main reasons as to why they weren't able to get the job done in 2023. The rotation was too old. The rotation was too banged up. And there's a reason as to why they weren't able to carry that into the next year. Now, I understand wanting to buy in right now. They're 2 games over 500. They could go into the playoffs, but I do believe in the quantity of this rotation as to where, if you're talking about the playoffs, if you are talking about going into a playoff game, Jose Quintana is not in that conversation. Jose Quintana, because the Mets, they're not winning the division. It's not going to happen. The Phillies are going to win that division. Whether they get the first wild card, the second wild card, you're going to be in that wild card series. You're playing a maximum of 3 games. Jose Quintana is not a starting pitcher 3. He's not a starting pitcher 2. He's obviously not going to be starting pitcher 1. So, Senga is going to be your best bullet, of course. He's going to be the starting pitcher 1, if he's back healthy, whatever. Severino, you're going to put out there, probably. Whether it's Scott or I don't know how they're going to manage that, of course, because of the innings limit or the health limit or whatever they're looking at that. And again, this is also a good argument. I get it. Jazz coming in saying Quintana out of the bullpen against Harper. Okay. That is a lefty-lefty thing that just brings me back to the Sean Gilmartin argument that we have all the time. I feel like that, if you're talking about...
Yeah, how about just go to Nunez instead?
Yeah, literally, you just go to Nunez. I need the best relievers. I need the best hitters. Again, if you can pitch to lefties, you can pitch to lefties. You got to pitch to both in this league. You just have to, especially with that 3-batter minimum rule. That's how it is. I get it. I understand wanting to keep a guy like Quintana, but this is an expiring free agent. He's not coming back next year. There's no way that Jose Quintana comes back next year.
Let's say they did make the playoffs, like Peterson probably goes to the pen. Like that's another option.
Possibly Peterson.
Yeah, and that Pearson stuff, like, profiles better as a reliever than Quintana. So, I mean,
it's hit or miss. But what if you're looking at it from the standpoint, I just don't see a role as for Quintana going into the playoffs.
I agree with that, but what I'm trying to prevent is I actually want to get there. So I
I
think
get it.
that I'm trying to
I
stay
understand.
prepared where an injury or two, it's like okay now does that kind of if it's still a tight race right there they could be out of the wild card tomorrow, you know what I mean, like it's such a tight thing where there's a lot of teams that are close. Arizona
Yeah.
could go on a run like they did last year, like a lot of things could happen. So I got to give myself the best possible chance. I need as many arms as possible, so I'm just trying to prepare for other scenarios. So I agree that like Quintana should not be in a playoff rotation. But I think in order just to win the amount of regular season games in case of injury, I want all my arms. I really don't want to subtract from that.
Yeah, and I get it, but I think that there is also that argument of half sell and half buy that has kind of been looming over us for the past few weeks of what is David Stearns going to do? Is he going to sell off some pieces? Is he going to replace some? Is he going to, is he going to DFA somebody that, is key, a key part to this team and playing second base? Is he going to do that? I hope he does. But when you look at it from the in-house decisions, I think that, there are some pieces that the Mets, if they're looking at 2025, I think if they're looking for 2025, I'm not going to go completely all in as to where I'm just going to add. There are some pieces here that I would listen on no matter what position that they're in. And this is not just like oh, listen on Pete Alonso because he's the expiring free agent. We already know that those trade talks are just a different story. I'm not talking about listen on Luis Severino. I'm talking about some pieces that are on one year deals that are very expandable considering the role that they are in. Jose Quintana, I don't see as someone who can have a huge role on this team down the stretch, even into the playoffs. I think that there are still arms out there that are better. I want to see them move Budo to the rotation again because I think he's way too sturdy of an arm for them to just give him 2 innings and rest him down for three straight days. So I think that I think that this is one of your arms right here that is the most expendable. And I get it. Tyler McGill gives us all nightmares. I get it. Nobody wants to, I get Joey Lucchesi was just designated for assignment. That's another point of, the quantity. I get it. But I need to see them somewhat do something for 2025 because I know that this team, I mean, I'm not convinced what they can do. I understand all you need to do is get into the playoffs. Anything can happen. But there are holes on this team that as to where they need to move some pieces or some major league pitching or, some major league pieces to kind of fill those holes. I think that the starting rotation, you have enough options as to where you can rotate this thing in and out. But the problem is you might have to rely on, which I don't want to do, a possible pitching prospect coming up here and maybe being another piece to this rotation, which I don't know if they're going to try and do that because the problem is that Blade Tidwell, in and out. Sproat, they're going to send him to AAA, even though it doesn't even matter. Vassell has also been somebody that has been brought up in trade talks, too, recently in the last few days, which we can talk about that as well. I think that when you look at Quintana, it's the best way to manage an asset in the position that they're in. And I get it. You want more weapons, more kills. I get it. But, I'm not investing full in on this team for a World Series run. I think that that's the way that they're going to look at it. They're going to fill in the pieces, try and win in the margins. That's kind of how they did in the offseason. If the Mets were on pace for an 100-win team, sure, keep Quintana. But I think that there still is a merit to retool this roster instead of just full-on buy. Jose Quintana is one of those pieces.
My one thing is like with Budo, I'm kind of getting a little nervous that he's going to end up in a similar situation that Seth Lugo was in, where it's a guy that you could put in the rotation and he could turn to be a very good starter. Maybe not Lugo caliber, like all-star starting potential, whatever, but just that the bullpen is such a weakness that someone's got to go in there to help them out. That's just kind of the way I see it, is that the bullpen is a weakness. Budo's helping it. If I take him out of it and put him in the rotation, like, I make the bullpen even worse. I just, like, with how bad it's been as like the main weakness with this team, like, I can't make it even worse.
I get it, but that also greenlights you into getting more bullpen help at the trading deadline, which is
well. That's the thing, is that if you're telling me I could trade Quintana for a high leverage arm in the bullpen, I'll listen to that. I'm okay with that.
I'm talking about like a 2 connector there, where you trade Quintana for whatever asset you get. I mean, I really don't care. I kind of just want to like kind of empty out that spot to kind of make this team a little bit more sustainable as to the where you're talking about like Jose Quintana being a fraud because his stuff ain't that good. But even if you kind of take him out of the rotation, it's not going to be a reliever, obviously. It's not going to be any high leverage reliever, any profile piece. But I think that if you were to trade Quintana, take him out of this rotation, kind of make this rotation a little bit younger and be able to withstand and not fully invest into the last 7 starts that he has had at an age 36 season, I think that's a way to go. Like, you can move somebody from this rotation, and there has been reports about that, of Stearns maybe shopping some of these guys around, even with being in contention. Obviously, Severino has kind of weighed himself out of that conversation. Minaya can go either way. And I think that Jose Quintana is that piece. I think that there's a better way as to where you can fill in the rotation that does not involve somebody like Jose Quintana. Because, like, even if we're talking about planning for the future or trying to get to the postseason, I just don't see Jose Quintana as a main contributor on a team like this. And I get it. He may be the most sturdy arm here as to where he's able to give you innings and be healthy. But those innings that he's giving you, you're guaranteeing pretty much that he's going to just go 5 innings. And you're going to run into the same problem as to where he's going 5 innings, then the bullpen starts to unravel. I'm trying to eliminate guys who can give me the best chance to go length in the rotation. And you may say, well, Jose Quintana, back-to-back starts, 7 innings pitched. Is he going to do that again? Is he going to continue to do that? I mean, let's be real for a second. I mean, we all know that we swallow our own hype a lot. I get it. When somebody does fairly well, we like to hype it up. And then the next time it comes around, you get a little dose into reality. I mean, it's Jose Quintana, right? This is supposed to be your starting pitcher 4, your starting pitcher 5. I think that there's better options out there. Maybe you do look at, somebody in the American League looking to offload a pitcher, a starting pitcher. Maybe you look in that direction, because I'm not ready to fully commit to let's put all the chips into the basket, because I think that this team can compete with some of these good teams, maybe in the playoffs, maybe catch something, but I'm not buying into it yet. I'm not buying into it as to where this is all in. This should be the $300 million payroll that it came out to be. I think that even if you talk about Quintana, whether he's good or not, they got to find a way as to where they can just sell high on value. Just once. Just do it once. And I don't know if that's going to be with Minaya, whether that's going to be with Quintana, whether it's going to be with one of these relievers, which I don't think they're going to do. I don't think they're going to get anything for a Ottavino or a Diekman. That's not going to happen. You're not going to get anything for a pending free agent in Drew Smith because he's injured. So I think when you just talk about just overall the rotation, this is like the best pivotal moment as to, sell high on the value. Just sell high. And then you could just move on from there. Whether you want to fill in the rotation and try to replace him, whether you're betting on Senga. Obviously, you need Senga to come back healthy, too. That's another factor. But I would consider moving somebody like Jose Quintana, because I think that this is one of those pieces that is very expendable, not just because of the starting rotation options, but because I think that this rotation could definitely be better without him in it. Because I think that you can get more innings without Jose Quintana in here. I'm trying to limit the bullpen coming in here. Whether they bring in these good relievers or not, I do want it to be a situation where we're guaranteed 6 out of this rotation. I think that that's the best way to sell high on a Jose Quintana who did go past the sixth inning, these last 2 starts, who has been pitching better. I think that that's the best way to do it. And for some reason, I know like it really is, it's recency bias. And I'm not accusing anybody of that. He's pitched well the last 7 starts. Great. Sell high on him. Is he really that irreplaceable? I mean, I think that there are arms in this system. There are arms internally, such as Budo, who I want to move to the rotation. There are pieces here. And I think even if you get something that's nothing in return, like I don't really care what you get in return for him, it's an expandable piece that they need to try, and I don't know, they need to try and just be able to manage an asset somehow, which they have not been able to do. And I mean, I've talked about this with Carlos Carrasco when he was here. Taijuan Walker, I've talked about this when he was here. There is good retooling that you can do. Jose Quintana is involved with that. And I think that people are looking at the last 7 starts that he has and saying that this guy is completely untouchable. He's not. He just isn't. I mean, and I know that you want to keep these guys for a playoff race, but you can move some of these pieces and retool the roster. And I think when you're stuck in a good place and a bad place with Jose Quintana, where he's had his best starts and he's had his worst starts this year, that's the best way where you can sell it off and retool the roster. I don't think that Jose Quintana is an irreplaceable piece. If he is so irreplaceable, as we're saying, then you may get a complete haul back for him, which is not true. So I would move him. That's just me, because I think that there's a better way to fill out this rotation, this back end of the rotation, to back up a guy like Senga, and able to put these guys on more rest, 6 days rest, obviously with the 6-man rotation. I think there's a better way to do it. But I'd like to get some assets back for him. I don't really care what they get back for him, to be honest. I just want to kind of clear the roster spot as to where we can get innings out of this rotation, and we don't talk about, oh, well, is this guy going to go through? Because I need innings. I need the guys who can give me innings. And that also puts in Minaya into that equation too, because Minaya has had volume trouble. I'm talking about this season as a whole. I'm not talking about the last 2 games. I'm not talking about the last 7 starts that Quintana had. Sell high when you can sell high. And like I said, Quintana is not a part of a playoff rotation. He is not a top 3 pitcher on this team. If he is, you're in trouble. You're in massive trouble. Senga, Scott, Severino, if you're talking about that, your top 3, whatever, for a playoff rotation. You're not going to be using Quintana as much as you think you're going to, whether it is in the playoffs, and you're not going to get that 7-inning workload that you continue to get, because they're not going to continue to play the Nationals over and over again. They're going to play more teams than that. So even if you're talking about Jose Quintana in this rotation, there's no real untouchable. There's no real untouchable piece. And this is a good point. When you said that you need depth to make it to October. I get it. I understand it. But I think that there's a better way that you can form together more innings out of this rotation, more distance, than removing Quintana and selling high on him. I don't know. I don't know how you think about that, but I just think that there's a way that you can just you can form this together as to where you can take out your weakest link who has really struggled to give you volume. I get Minaya is also in there too. And you can kind of like retool that rotation and get more innings out of it.
Yeah, I mean that's the problem too, is that like we don't know how long the Quintana like good starts are gonna last for. Like I don't like we're not gonna see a guy with an ERA under 2 with Alvarez for the entirety of the regular season. Like that's not gonna happen either. You know, I mean, I do think there are there's bound to be, because with the stuff he has,
with this,
like
okay,
yeah,
when you say in-house replacement for Quintana, who will give you consistent quality starts, you weren't saying that 6 weeks ago.
Yeah,
you 100% weren't. That's what I mean. We're riding the highs right now. You're looking at this thing as a whole. Is he going to continue that? Because we've seen the very worst as to where he's out of here by the 4th inning and killing the bullpen. I'm trying to prevent Reed Garrett from going down again. I'm trying to prevent Danel Nunez from getting killed. Right? So I think that there's the best way to do that as to where some guys that just cannot get through the 3rd time around the order. Some guys that can't get through the 6th inning consistently. Quintana's one of those guys. Sell high.
Yeah, the Mets got Sean Reed Foley, Josh Wisnowski, who's actually turned out to be a pretty good pitcher for the Boston Red Sox. There's another pitcher that's better without the Mets. And even Khalil Lee for a struggling Steven Matz coming off of a down year. So with a hot Jose Quintana, you're bound to get multiple arms that could be either fringe starter or relievers for you, but just multiple young arms that are going to be with you maybe this year almost, but definitely next year, the year after that, where Jose Quintana's gone next year. So there is a case to be made for it. It's just, I don't know. I mean, again, I still need to see the replacements as far as, because I get like, Trey Quintana, put Budo in the rotation. I'm fine with that. But I think now just replace that bullpen spot for Budo, and then I'm okay with it.
Yeah, of course. I get it. And obviously you do have a Sean Reed Foley who maybe he does come back from injury in a few weeks or something like that. That's another factor.
And maybe that's your replacement. Like that could be it too.
Maybe that is the replacement, of course. There's a lot of things that have to go right. I get it. But also, you kind of have that mentality as well with Jose Quintana where a lot of things have to go right for him as well. And this is another point where I'm saying Quintana has had a good ERA except for when Alvarez was injured. And listen, I'm fine with the ERA. If the ERA satisfies you for a good starting pitcher, go ahead. It's not something that I take into full-on account because there's a lot of luck involved that goes on with ERA. That's just how it is. But if you're talking about good ERA or not, where are the innings? That's what I care about, the volume. I'm not talking about the quality. The quality has been there. You will constantly see the Mets, their starting pitcher, they give up 2 to 3 runs, typically. Sometimes you have a blow-up. Typically, you see that. 2 to 3 runs. On a bad day, 4 to 5 runs. Where's the volume? That's the problem. And that's what has really gotten them into a situation where they are killing this bullpen. They're getting to the point where they're bringing up the Tyler Jays and the Ty Adcox and the who's that other guy we had here? Matt Festa. That's how bad it's gotten. You know, I'm trying to protect the bullpen more because their workload is not the usual for a bullpen day in and day out. Because even though they are in the middle of the pack in relief innings or whatever, you still have guys working back-to-back days constantly. And I get it, there's some holes in the bullpen you got to fill as well, which I think that's what they have to address. But I want to see them put Budo in the rotation. I think Budo will benefit from having the extra day of rest, and I get it, not wanting to like clone the reps or whatever. Maybe you throw McGill in there, but it doesn't seem like they want to make him a reliever right now. It seems like they want to stretch him out as a starter still. And I think when you look at it as a whole, they need to take it as addition by distraction. Addition by
subtraction.
Guys,
yes.
I want to let you guys know, when we film these podcasts, I'm in a very warm room. Okay, so if it sounds like I'm having a stroke sometimes when I'm talking, it's the original. Okay, that's normal for me. But anyways, addition by subtraction is how I say it.
I just saw an interesting report from Pat Ragazzo that the Yankees are persistently pursuing multiple Cincinnati Reds relievers as they attempt to bolster their bullpen in the coming weeks. So, is there anybody from Cincinnati besides Alexis Diaz, who's not really having a great year, that kind of tickles the fancy at all in the pen? Because they're basically saying that Cincinnati is actually in Tampa to scout talent. So that's kind of interesting, because Cincinnati right here is like middle of the pack in this race. So are they going to be selling? I mean, probably. Yeah. They're really not too great. So, I mean, there's some arms here, like, former David Stearns darling Brent Suter. That's a left-handed pitcher.
That was somebody we were linked to.
Yeah. So I mean, Buck Farmer, like, there's Lucas Sims, like, there's some guys here, but nothing too crazy. But it's just another team to consider that, I that's kind of why, some people want to see them make trades. You have to let it play out a little bit, in the sense as see what teams kind of fall out of the mix, because then you might have more options available than you originally thought. And then you're like, oh, well, we settled for this team that was selling from Colorado, but it's like, oh, look, now pitchers from the Reds or pitchers from this team are now available, and we can go after those guys instead.
Yeah, I'm just not trying to keep the recency bias as to looking towards the future. Like, who knows? Like, maybe the next time that we talk, I mean, I hope it doesn't happen, because they're playing the Colorado Rockies. Maybe they drop 2 games out of the wild card race, and then you're talking about, oh, well, they might have to sell here. Like, we are on such a seesaw right now, because the Mets are at this 500 point, right? They're hovering around the 500. This is the highest they've been in a while.
Oh no.
So, is it possible that maybe San Diego is a seller, even though they're tied with us right now in 2 weeks? Who knows? Right?
Speaking of,
who knows what it is? What the situation
guess who cooked up a trade on SNY today?
Zach Scott, right?
No, Jim Duquette. He a Mets Guardians trade. Giving up Sean Manaea. So here we go about trading from the rotation for bullpen help for Scott Barlow or Sam Hedges and a prospect. So there's your trade rotation for bullpen, but Barlow is just, I don't trust him in a big spot. Like, no. But I don't know. Like,
that's not the type of guy that I would obviously, because, like, for me, anybody that we trade off of this team, it is to get younger. I don't think it's a win now, because, like, I think that there's guys that if you trade out, because we will get into the comments that Stearns made the other day when he was addressing the media after they got Phil Maton. But I think that it's more of a connectors trade when you talk about moving on from some of these assets that are going to be expiring at the end of the year, whether it is Quintana, whether you're talking about trading somebody like, whether you're talking about trading somebody like Manaea, or, even if you're talking about trading somebody like Tyler McGill or David Peterson, who also have a little bit more value because of the years of control. I don't really care what you get really back as return, because I hope that it just makes the organization younger, which it obviously will. But then you kind of just connect it as to where any assets you want to give up for those relievers, that comes from another state. So you're kind of just two-piecing a trade. So let's say you trade a starter for minor league assets. Maybe you use those assets or some other assets that made it a little bit more of a surplus by acquiring those assets from the starting pitcher, and then getting a reliever from there, addressing it from option. Maybe you get a long relief piece that maybe can start in a pinch or something like that. That's also something you can consider, but that's more of just kind of what they've gotten from Adrian Hauser, which I don't want to change. I think Adrian Hauser's perfect in the bullpen the way that he is. Don't change that whatsoever. We know that of the nightmare that he had in the starting rotation. So I think that there's the best way as to where there's sell moments and there's buy moments of how the Mets can retool this roster, because the Mets are on such a seesaw right now. They're on after every series, our record could be below 500. Our record would be above 500. If they start stringing together these wins, maybe you get more into the part of buying at the deadline. But right now, I'm in between as to where the Mets are in between. They're stuck in the middle. They're at 500. They're playing 500 baseball throughout the entire year, the whole year as a whole. There's buy pieces and there's sell pieces. You have Quintana or Manaya that you move as sell pieces. Then you have the buy pieces, which most of them are relievers, obviously, with the help that they obviously needed that department right now. I'd say that it's more, the low guys, the lower non-names, of course, catching lightning in a bottle. But, even if you do sell off pieces, it's the best way to retool this roster. I personally think so, because you get the surplus of pieces that make your organization deeper in order to get some of those assets. It's the best way to manage those assets, and I think that that's the best way to do it organizationally. And listen, easy. Again, you're telling me that I don't want the Mets to make the playoffs. I do. But are you really saying this because of Jose Quintana? Jose Quintana is the main reason as to why I don't want the Mets to make the playoffs? Again, you wouldn't be saying this 6 weeks ago. Everybody was ready to send Jose Quintana off to the moon. That's what I mean. Every single 5 days, there's a different opinion about this team. So when you talk about the seesaw of going back and forth, that's what you get. Buy or sell. A little bit of both. Retooling the roster to kind of take them to a little bit more of that next level. Again. But guess what? Here's another, try selling my narrative to the fan base. I don't give a shit what the fan base thinks. To be honest, I don't. Because half of the fan base don't understand what sustainability is. They just want to build a team for Diamond Dynasty. It's not going to work like that.
And keep in mind who's running it is David Stearns. And, there's always in the back of your mind that this guy traded Josh Hader, who is much more high profile than Jose Quintana, when Milwaukee was still playing well. He's
traded major league pieces for major league pieces. He's done that before. He's done it
before. Yeah. So
yeah,
it's
times.
It's not a crazy thought at all.
Whether it's the Josh Hader trade, the Mike Moustakas trade. What was the other thing the other one that he did? The Gio Gonzalez trade at that moment. There was tons of points where he did that. So again, I think that when you look at it from retooling, there's more innovative moves that you could be not expecting or maybe expecting from somebody like David Stearns, whether you're familiar with him or not. So again, speaking of David Stearns, let's get into what he was able to reveal for us after acquiring Phil Maton. I can't talk today, folks, so you guys may have to read this in your head. But obviously, we got the boss man to speak the other day, and here's what we got. Obviously, we gave our input of kind of the plan that we would do of the trade deadline at this current moment, but he also talked about player input regarding the trade deadline. And he said, one of the reasons why I try to be around is that I can hear from the players. I like hearing from our players. I think it's important to me to get their perspective. And it's certainly great for me to hear that our veteran players think that we're good enough to deserve to add. So you can see a little bit of back and forth there. Maybe it's a possibility. Maybe they do this. Maybe they do that. Pretty undecided. Now, roster adjustments, which we also talked about just a second ago. when Senga comes back. He said that once Senga is back, our default stance will be a 6-man. We may deviate from that occasionally, but I think once he's back, the default will be a 6-man, which was all what we've really kind of expected with the days of rest that he's used to in Japan, and of course coming back from injury. Now, Joey Lucchesi designated for assignment as the corresponding move for Phil Maton. We have had some questions about this organization not really thinking very highly of him. Obviously, it's just taking it as the face card, of course, but David Stearns did say Joey has pitched well at times. It's certainly our hope that we'll be able to retain him, but we'll see what happens. So again, there's question marks there, of course, but other notes that you can take from Stearns, of course, which pretty much are pretty much obvious here, saying that it's unlikely that Mets prospect Ronnie Mauricio plays in 2024, which I believe that we're all fine with, to be honest, coming off an ACL surgery. Saying that the Mets will absorb all of Maton's remaining salary, which does include a 2025 team option. And, of course, talking about Christian Scott and that he does not have a strict innings limit for the remainder of the 2024 season. Obviously, that is just more of innings of what he is pitching. And, of course, like we've said, the days of rest is more of the factor. So even if the Mets do look at the deadline as to where more pitching heavy, or maybe there is a bat they add in or two to maybe make the bench piece go away in DJ Stewart or something like that. I think that there is player input, and I think that he's taking everything into consideration. We're talking about David Stearns here as to where they just have to catch lightning in a bottle for him to make the decision. Like, it's all up to the Mets in order to compete for him to make these types of decisions, because that's kind of how he built this team, in the margins.
I have a random question. If, let's say, Nolan McLean was a little more advanced, could they call him up and be like, this is a hitter call-up, but he's going to pitch a little bit too, and they could kind of finagle the rules a little bit? I wonder if that's even like an option.
Does that count as two roster spots? I don't know. How do the
No way.
No?
I can't.
That doesn't count as two roster spots?
No, I don't think so. But like, let's just say for the sake of argument that like there was a two-way guy that they could just send down DJ Stewart and be like, he's pitching. He's supposed to be an outfielder, but he also just happens to pitch, and they could get away with having an extra arm. I don't know. It's just a random thought I had, but I mean, anyways, yeah, it's just something because I just want to know again on the arm because again, like wasn't that time we saw Ben Gamel? Like we could just get so much more out of a pitcher. Like
it's for vibes.
It's just frustrating to me. But I just find it interesting with Lucchesi that they decided to DFA him instead of like a Tyler J or Josh Walker, Cole Sulser, like some of these other guys on this 40-man that were like, that guy has to stick around even though we don't really want to see them on the major league level. And, there is something to be said, the fact that Lucchesi hasn't been claimed yet, like that. We always like talk about other organizations value players differently than you might value your own. Sometimes we overvalue players. Like stuff like that does happen. So, we'll see. I wouldn't panic too much about it. I think again, like you have to trust Stearns with this. And I do feel that Maton already is going to have a bigger impact for winning ball games in 2024 than Joey Lucchesi was.
Yeah. And again, with Joey Lucchesi, for some reason, again, it's more of a heartwarm thing, I think, with a lot of Mets fans. They saw the Churv thing, they saw this little thing, and everybody likes him so much. Yeah. And again, this is also another point from Jazz in the chat here saying that Lucchesi has no control years left like the others. That's another point. And again, I think that he's kind of gone down the pecking order a little bit too far as to where there's no real reason to kind of have him as a factor here. And, that's another reason as to why they kind of just like clear these spots. So maybe they could, even if they do with Joey Lucchesi, which I don't think they will, because it seems like they do want to retain him if he does clear through waivers, which I think he's going to. it doesn't seem like, you know, it's not just as, you know, another man's trash is another man's treasure, but it's like the Mets have Joey Lucchesi, who is at best right now, he's a starting pitcher 11 for them. Like right now, it's starting pitcher 11, starting pitcher 10. He really isn't that good. The only really reason as to why people like him is because of the quantity, because they're comfortable with him. He's been here for multiple years now, and he's had good performances. But again, like I said, if you're talking about having a guy on your roster for a playoff run, Joey Lucchesi is not going to have any part of that. I get depth is okay, but it's not as big as a loss as people think it is. Like, again, and even if he's performing bad, if he has a bad ERA in AAA, even if he does, it's not really as big of a loss, and you can see that by the impression from all 29 other teams that are in this league. No one is jumping on Joey Lucchesi, and I get it. Nobody really wants to like just add on that salary. Not everybody has the Steve Cohen money where they can just add on a, what is it, $1.7 million that he's making or something like that.
He's not getting paid that much. I mean,
he's not getting paid that much, but again, some teams. It's
not the contract that's holding them back. Like,
it's not the contract that's holding them back. Again, it's just not. So it's not like it's a big loss to this organization if he leaves. It really isn't. And to be honest, he's projected to probably get a raise in arbitration 3 next year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the best way to do it. Like kind of anticipating things. And next year, even if Joey Lucchesi comes back here, and even next year where he has ARB 3 or something like that.
I don't see them giving him a raise. I
don't
see that.
Yeah, exactly. Do you see them even tendering a contract to him next year?
I don't.
Like, let's be real for a second. Like, yes, he's had a few performances here. He's a major league-ish starter. But are we saying that this is the big loss? You know, like that's it. Like, Joey's a free agent at the end of this year. I thought he has another year of control, doesn't he? I think what's his name's a free agent at the end. Hauser's a free agent at the end of the year.
He could be coming up pretty soon. He's been here for he's been here longer than you think. Like he's been here for a while now.
His ARB is up? I don't think it is it? I'll have to look at that. But like this. I mean you understand what I'm saying about Lucchesi, right? Like I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Like I don't think it's really as big of a loss as people think it is. It's just the fact of the quantity that people are they're pissed off about. Yeah, he is a free agent at the end of the year. That is true. So Jazz is correct. Yes. So he is a free agent at the end of the year. So you're going to lose him either way. You're not going to get anything back for him because, again, he hasn't been pitching well in AAA and he hasn't pitched well in the major leagues recently. You know, he's 31 years old. So at one point, I mean, it's something you can lose to clear up a 40-man roster spot. Go ahead. You know? It says he's a free agent at the end of entering the 2025 season. So unless he's like gotten enough service time in that 4th year, or in that 5th year where he can be a free agent.
Yeah, it feels like he hasn't.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, we've had the service time as to where we DFA'd Tomas Nido, and he had enough service time as to where he could just be a free agent.
Yeah, that was interesting.
He just doesn't have a future in this organization. He just doesn't. Like, he just does not have a future in this organization because even if you get an injury in this starting rotation, which everybody doesn't want to take out Jose Quintana because he's so valuable in the last 7 starts that he had. Jesus Christ. Even if let's say Severino goes down, you're going to McGill. You're going to have Budo maybe move to the starting rotation. You're going to go to David Peterson, obviously, he's in the rotation right now. You're going to go to McGill. You're probably even going to go to Max Kranick, who's coming back who's rehabbing as of right now, who I think made it to AAA again. You're probably going to go to him before you go to Joey Lucchesi. The only guy that I think Joey Lucchesi is over right now is Mike Vassell, who has been horrendous in AAA right now. Another piece that they may move out here. I think that you're in this pivotal spot where you can't really compete with some of these teams. You can't really know if you're going to make the playoffs for sure. There's retooling in the process, and you have to like shave off some of the pieces. You know that you gotta let go of some of these pieces. You can't hoard everyone. You can't just say I need Lucchesi here, but I also want to keep McGill, and I also want to keep this guy, and I also want to keep this guy. You got to make a decision. You can only have a 40-man roster. So hopefully they are able to retain him. If it makes everybody sleep at night and they have the quantity of Joey Lucchesi doing this once or twice, and it makes everyone feel better. But for some reason, I don't know why everyone is kind of upset about that. I think the main reason as to why they dropped Joey Lucchesi is, one, he's a free agent at the end of the year, or maybe he does have another year of control. Who knows? But also, they have so many issues with this bullpen right now that they're going to keep as many relievers on the 40-man roster as possible. This guy really hates the players on his team. Yes, I do. They all stink. Exactly. All right.
Oh, God. Why don't you tell him how you feel about David Peterson?
Fraud. That's how I feel about him.
If you think Carson wants to trade Quintana, he would personally drive David Pearson to the airport if they got a trade for him.
Yeah, but other comments for this, obviously, Ronnie Mauricio, pretty much likely. We already knew that was going to happen. But as for the 6-man rotation, I think we've already know that was pretty much official. Other things like, the player input and everything like that. We know that Brandon Nimmo has been pretty active on Twitter the last few hours or something, kind of talking about putting themselves in a position to win, obviously, with his post-game conference or whatever, and he was like retweeting all of that or whatever. So obviously, a lot of the players...
And they said behind the scenes, he's been pushing for reinforcements. So
yeah, he's saying get rid of Jeff McNeil. He's terrible. But no, I don't see Nimmo saying that. Yeah, this team sucks. But the player input is the player input. I think that there's everything that's coming into consideration with Stearns because it can go either way. It really can go either way. There's no strict buy right now.
Yeah, and I also think that, I was going to say with Scott, there not being an innings limit is interesting. Like, not being a set number. Like, yes, they want to limit his innings, but it's just interesting.
I think they're expecting him to get enough rest when Senga comes back. That's the thing. As to where, then they can put this into full swing. Then they can put this into where, every 5 days he can go out there. He has the extra day of rest, and they kind of put that in. Like we said the last episode, we were talking about that. They were counting on Kodai Senga giving them those innings, and they haven't gotten any of them from them this year. So, I mean, even if, they try and, fill in this rotation with internal pieces, whether they just like turn around and shock us and maybe get a controllable piece from Miami or something, who knows? I don't think that's going to happen. Maybe they do get another piece to the rotation. I'd like to see them do that because I think that there's a better way to get volume out of it. But Jose Quintana is so good. I'm being petty right now. Fuck y'all. Nice. But I think even if Christian Scott, the innings limit isn't a thing, I think that the limits really just go on the days of rest. That I stay at the same point that I did last episode where, they're kind of just trying to manage this start by start, and I think that you're going to get a more determined answer as to what his workload's going to be when Senga comes back. Obviously, Senga's workload is going to be still in question mark with him coming off injury. But Scott, the extra day of rest, he'll be able to maneuver a little bit better because obviously, like we said, he was able to go 90 plus pitches against Washington after he had 7 days of rest from his last AAA start.
I think it
So
was more than that. I think it was almost like 10. Maybe
was
it
it
was quite.
10? Yeah, it was what was it, the
Quite a
25th
bit.
to 3 to the 3rd. So
It was quite a bit of days.
yeah, there was quite a bit of layover. So I think that there's a possibility. I mean, we obviously have the questions of effectiveness with him of the third time
And we'll
through the
find
order.
out
We still
soon.
don't
I
know,
mean, he's going to be
right?
pitching in this Colorado series. So the fact that they did 99, 77, I wonder if we're being like the middle ground, maybe like 80 something. You know what I mean? I don't think it's going to be 99. I feel like it's
Mm,
going to be kind of somewhere in the middle.
mm, mm. We'll see. I think that they're gonna build up his arm again, and I think that the rest is the main factor, of course, because it seems like that is what they've been going by with more of a 5-man rotation that went on in Syracuse. So that was the main reason why they were limiting it, also saving the bullets in AAA. We've said this multiple times. But other than that, I think we should get to everyone's favorite segment, Studs and Duds. One player that has played fairly well in this series, and there was a lot of them because we swept them. It was good. It was a good performance. And then one player that we just don't like right now, and we would do mean things off camera if they were in front of us. I don't know. I'm running out of jokes. All right. Stud of this series. Who do you got, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually quite a few candidates. When you get the sweep, a lot of things have to go right. So I'm going to give it to someone who normally doesn't get enough credit, and that's Jose Iglesias. He unfortunately didn't get to play today against the left-hander, but he had a big game on the second game, getting the 3 hits, driving in 2 runs in big opportunities, and he's just another one of these guys where they call him up. He gets off to a red-hot start, and you're like, oh, well, he's hitting over 400. This isn't going to stick. This is just, not sustainable, this, that, and the other. But average, still 352, OPS 880. I think is at like OPS plus of like 137 or something like that. Like, we're waiting for, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like Vientos and some of these other guys where I'm like, okay, I'm waiting to see the regression. I'm waiting for them to come back down to earth. And it's still not happening. And obviously, he gives great vibes, but he's just been really good when they play him.
Yeah.
And, they've got, like I said, they've gotten to play him a little more. Unfortunately, with McNeil still being in the lineup, just in the outfield instead. But I just gotta give him credit that he gets to play very rarely, but still does well when he does. And that's not easy to do because he doesn't really get a chance to actually build up that rhythm, that consistency. He just kind of, here you go, and he does well with the opportunities. And being able to come in when it matters with runners on base, runners in scoring position. That's not easy for a lot of guys. Can't take that for granted. So he's been amazing with that, and hopefully he keeps it going.
Well, I think the best way to describe this is just the man who is on a tear right now, and that being Brandon Nimmo. You just can't leave him out of this conversation, even if he is snubbed from the All-Star game. Even ever since then, even before then, the stretch that he has been on has been remarkable, and I talked about this on Twitter earlier today. The guy has an 1100 OPS with runners in scoring position, and it just keeps going up. He's just cashing runs in. I mean, he's just automatic. There's nothing bad you can say about Brandon Nimmo. You just can't. There's nothing. There's no criticism. He's even stealing more bases now, right? There's no criticism for Brandon Nimmo. You just can't. It's impossible. And yet another amazing series from Brandon Nimmo. And he's been one of the main reasons as to why this offense has continued to get going even after a truly, unrepeatable June that they have had going into July. Let's get to studs. There were some that stood out. Or duds. Let's get to duds.
Yeah. For the dud, I'm going to have to give it to Adam Ottavino. I really just hate when Nunez has to come into a game because a guy can't get the job done. It's like Mendoza is trying to put Ottavino in position to succeed. It's like, okay, here's a pretty big lead. Don't mess it up. There's not that much pressure. Just get through the inning. And he can't do that. And then today, Diaz had to get warmed up. Like, Ottavino loaded up the bases and then finally figured it out, got the strikeouts to get out of it. But still, Diaz had to get warmed up. Nunez had to come in the other day. It's like every time this guy is on the mound, even if he doesn't give up a run, he still gives you anxiety in the process and still makes the really good relievers. Like the whole point of bringing Ottavino into the game is to rest Diaz, so the fact, and rest Nunez. So the fact these guys either have to come in or get warmed up because he can't protect a 7-run lead is just insane. And it just happens way too frequently. And he's one of those guys that we talk about so much where he doesn't finish his outings. Like, how many times does Mendoza have to take the ball from him because he can't do a inning? Like, it's just so tough. Like, they're trying to put him in low leverage, and he turns low leverage into high leverage because of how bad he pitches.
Shouldn't exist, like we've said, because it's useless. I mean, it really is useless. And, like, I don't know. I don't understand why he's still here. I mean, it really, it's not even like when people are talking about, like, oh, he's reaching DFA territory. He's been there for a while. Yeah. He has been there for a long time. He should not even be here. Someone else should be here. We know what Adam Ottavino is. We know what he's going to do at his best. We know what he's going to do at his worst. And what you're saying is really true. We have a lot of less than an inning outings where he's just facing three batters, not even getting past an inning. We've had quite a few of those.
And you feel like if there was a 3-batter minimum, you might pull him earlier, honestly. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh, you face your 3. It's like, now I can finally get you out. Like, it's just crazy.
I mean, and ever since this May,
2 months
what has
ago.
it been? It's been, even if you want to talk about 2 months ago.
Oh, great. April, even worse. It was April, even worse. 3 months ago.
Yeah. Sorry, April. All right, well, ERA over 4.5 since then. Mm-hmm. So there you go. I mean, again, I mean, I just don't care what happens in the past. I don't care.
And that's the thing too. And don't let this go unnoticed is that when Ottavino puts runners on and then Nunez comes in and strands those runners, he saves Ottavino's ERA. Because if Nunez wasn't so good at stranding runners, Ottavino's ERA gets even worse. So he needs to be thankful that these other guys come in and bail him out.
I mean, I just can't do it anymore, man. I really don't really know why he's still here. I mean, there really is. I get it. Like, you're hurting internally right now with the bullpen, but there's got to be somebody else. There's got to be someone else.
He just couldn't throw his glove in the crowd instead. It couldn't.
No.
That'd be
probably would like. I mean,
he
that would be the only.
Yeah, he probably would have missed the crowd anyway. It would have just like hit DJ Stewart in the face or something. Who knows?
Okay. Yeah, who knows? All right. Well, my dud. I mean, I guess DJ Stewart is like the only one that you really can establish here. But I mean, he didn't play today. But it's just too much. Like, just shouldn't be batting 8th, or shouldn't be batting 8th. Shouldn't be batting 5th. Shouldn't be batting 6th. He just shouldn't be here. It's just you gotta move this. Just move on from this. But it's kind of like when you talk about just his like overall production that he's given you recently, it's nothing. And not to mention, just there are guys in AAA that probably could fill that roster spot better than him just based on their versatility. I'm not even talking about if they're going to hit well for you. It just makes the bench a little bit better with the tools that they provide. Right now, DJ Stewart doesn't provide that. So I think that's the best way to explain it. And Alonso's a good one too, because like Alonso's still just been Alonso, not doing Alonso things. I mean, he drove in a run today, and then yesterday he had 2 hits or whatever, so he wasn't awful, but still not the Alonso we want. So I mean, again, these are just like the micro analyzing as of right now, because the Mets did sweep this series. They played good baseball throughout this one, and they scored more runs than the other team, and that's kind of like the objective of the team of the game. So let's get into the
and
injury
now their
report here.
Run differential isn't neutral anymore because they had a 7-0 game.
Man, there you go.
Now have
exactly.
a positive run
differential. And you know, the run differential has kind of put them in a better position. Now, going on to the injury report, Kodai Senga completed his 2nd rehab assignment for AAA Syracuse on Tuesday night. He had 2 2/3, 2 hits, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts. Did not allow a run. He threw 52 pitches, and his next rehab start will be for Syracuse on Sunday, where he's going to throw about 60 to 65 pitches. So we're still elevating it a little bit. We're on a slow pace as of right now, but he could be back fairly soon after the All-Star break. Starling Marte, not much of an update on him, but we did get a report from Carlos Mendoza yesterday saying that he will receive imaging on Thursday, which is today, so maybe we will get some news tomorrow about the possible steps in his recovery. Obviously, we know that he has been on the injured list ever since June 25th with a right knee bone bruise, and definitely his presence is missed in the bottom half of that lineup, anchoring it as compared to some guys like DJ Stewart or Tyrone Taylor, who's been fairly streaky as of recent. Reed Garrett, of course, the big injury news this week. Placed on the uninjured list yesterday with right elbow inflammation. The MRI did reveal just nerve inflammation, so the Mets dodged quite a bullet. It did not show any UCL or elbow ligament damage, and he is only expected to miss about 2 to 4 weeks. We don't know if there's a rehab assignment sprinkled in with there, but they definitely avoided the worst with Reed Garrett, especially with the workload that he had this season. And of course, some more news if you're talking about the young guys. Drew Gilbert began his minor league assignment rehab for the Florida Complex League Mets affiliate. He has been sidelined since the beginning of April with a torn right hamstring. Had his procedure. He's coming back. We still don't know what the impact will be on the Major League roster. It's better to say that he most likely will not play for the Mets Major League team this year, mainly because he has not gotten his feet wet in AAA just yet. So, going into the last series before the All-Star break, the Mets will take on the Colorado Rockies. This is not a good baseball team, so I expect them to be at 50-45 going into the All-Star break. Anything less, to be honest, is a disappointment because, again, Colorado is horrendous. They are an awful team. So, going into it, going into the next series, into the All-Star break.
Chris Bryant is hurt again. He won't be
Chris
playing.
Bryant's hurt. And again, listen, you're getting silver platters into the All-Star break right now. Take advantage of it. They did with the Nationals. Do it with the Rockies right here. Keep winning. Parting words here. Frank, what do you got here?
Yeah, I mean, as long as Troy Tulowitzki and Mark Reynolds and company don't come back from the dead and suit up for the Colorado Rockies, we should be okay. So, like we say, just take care of business. Keep doing what you're doing. You only got 3 games left before you get some rest. So, just get it done. You know, I mean, just keep rolling and keep the good play going.
Well, I mean, they always have to have a little bit of stress involved with it. But again, they are playing really good baseball. They have been able to kind of back up a red-hot June so far this week, go into the All-Star break on a high note. I'm also hoping that, you know, we've talked about it before. I'm hoping that this home run derby kind of helps Alonso somewhat. I mean, that's going to probably be like your last chance at kind of proving that he's a future piece to this team, of course. So, you know, I'm hoping that it does, because if he's contributing to this team, along with this team being as deep of a lineup as it is, it's even more dangerous. So we're going to need Pete Alonso to step it up in the second half of this season, because we're going to need him for the long stretch to contribute, whether this team is scoring 5 to 6 runs a game. He is a main contributor to that, and he is one of the reasons as to why this team succeeds or they fail. He's a big part of it, no matter what. Other than that, we'll see you guys next time for the next episode after the Colorado Rockies series. We may have something planned-ish for the All-Star break. I'm still not sure what. I'm still weighing out the options. But other than that, for those of you who came in and watched this live, watched the entire thing, for those of you listening on playback, for those of you who popped in for a little bit, thank you so much. For those of you who have tuned in, make sure to subscribe to the Mets YouTube channel, if you have not already, to turn on those post notifications for this very podcast that is regularly scheduled and recorded on Sundays and Thursdays following every series of games, along with our audio version that drops at 9 a.m. the following day. Make sure to follow everybody individually. Follow us on TikTok and X for Frank's post games that he does after every single game. The Mets Frankly post game, as we like to call it. And last thing is just simply, let's go Mets, even though apparently I want this team to not make the playoffs. See you guys next time.